A show about relaxing garden settings coming up right after this. During my years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore and create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home, a show about design and blurring the lines between inside and out. You know, as a designer, when I'm creating a space, whether it's inside or somewhere in between like this porch or outside, I'm always trying to think about how that space makes me feel. Usually I want to be relaxed when I'm in that space. That's what I had in mind here with this sleeping porch. You can hear the sound of the fountain below, the beautiful views beyond, the regular breeze that's up here, all help work together to make a very restful, peaceful environment. Now, in today's show, we're going to visit a few places that offer up a sense of tranquility and peace. One in particular is the Arlington National Cemetery, the resting place for thousands of military men and women who've served our country. We'll also go to New York to visit Bridge Gardens and visit a friend of mine who gives us a tour of a labyrinth designed for meditation. I'll also show you how to plant daffodils in containers. Plus, we'll drop by the Denver Botanic Garden for a brief overview. And I can't wait to share this delicious recipe with you. But first, I want to take a moment just to focus on some beautiful and helpful houseplants. Now, they love this environment out here on the screen porch throughout the entire summer. But let's go inside and I want to show you a few more. Let's take a closer look. This is one of the most relaxing rooms here at the Garden Home. It's one of the guest bedrooms. And what makes it so relaxing, I think, is the color of the walls. I chose a really pale lavender and the way the light comes in through the windows. And the comfort and tranquility is really added, I think, by these houseplants. I love having them around. You know, I think so often when we think about having plants indoors or outdoors, even more so, we think about blooms and not so much about foliage. And these are very simple foliage plants. Look at the variegation that we have on this one, and this one's just a simple green plant. I'd like to choose plants that have sort of a thick, succulent-like leaf. Typically, that means that plant doesn't have to be watered so often. And it's really not that important that you even know the names of the plants, but it's more important to me that you understand what the health benefits are of having living plants in your home. This is probably the most compelling reason to fill your home with foliage houseplants because you see they can remove toxins from the air pollutants that are found in our houses. And these pollutants come from industrial chemicals that are used to manufacture building materials and from numerous household cleaners that may contain things like formaldehyde, benzene, ammonia, acetone, and ethyl acetate. These pollutants are actually absorbed through the leaves of the plants and are converted into harmless substances. So you may be wondering, well, how many houseplants do you really need to create this sort of environment where the air is actually being purified? Well, a good rule of thumb is one substantial houseplant. I don't mean a tiny one and I don't mean a great big one, but a medium size, a plant about this size, houseplant per 100 square feet of your home is really what you need. For average size house, maybe 15 to 20 plants in the house will do the job. And not only will they help clean the air, but hey, they're beautiful. On a recent trip to New York, I visited the lovely Bridge Gardens, where I had a chance to visit with Rick Bogosh about their elaborate privet garden.
I'm just fine-tuning the privet hedge here. Privet hedges are an important part of Bridge Gardens. We have about 1/8 of a mile of privet, double row, which is quite unusual. And we have to prune them about 4 or 5 times a growing season. The privet hedges not only divide the garden, the 5 acres, into 2 major spaces, but they also serve as a corridor uniting the gardens. And 2 interesting features of our privet hedges are the top, the waves that we've sculpted into the top. It's not just a flat hedge. And every so often we have portholes for viewing into both the herb garden and into the other major space of Bridge Gardens. What's nice about the privet hedges, especially the double privet hedges and the corridor that they create, is it adds a sense of whimsy to the garden and a sense of mystery. You wonder what's around the corner. We think that our privet hedges are an integral part of Bridge Gardens. Certainly our visitors enjoy it. And even though they require a lot of time and effort and work, we think that they're worth it.
I was honored to visit a 200-acre memorial for over 300,000 people that served our country in so many ways. There are soldiers from previous and current wars, presidents, astronauts, and many more. The Arlington National Cemetery is one of the most breathtaking places I've ever seen. Eric Deal, Director of Horticulture, talks to me about Arlington and its gardens. Eric, this amphitheater is so handsome.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's a spot used throughout the year for both large commemorative events and as a somewhat of an intimate space where people can come enjoy our landscape and contemplate what their visit to Arlington is all about.
It's very different than the broader view of Arlington. I mean, you think of it as this vast park almost with the rolling hills that's very open, and this is very intimate.
And people often don't realize that until they visit Arlington. You're right, the iconic rolling hills and the white headstones going off in the distance. And as you walk through the cemetery, suddenly you come to this, what we call our old amphitheater, developed in the late 19th century.
I love the Ionic Columns at the top. I mean, it's just really such a handsome space.
It is. It was, of course, very popular in the Victorian era when this entire portion of the cemetery was developed. We're probably about 100 yards or so behind the Custis Lee Mansion at this point.
Eric, the rose has always been associated with memorial gardens, and I certainly see beautiful examples right here in the amphitheater at Arlington.
Yes. This is called Veterans Honor. It's a fairly recent rose introduction within the last 10, 12 years or so.
Appropriately named.
Appropriately named. We have what we call our old rose garden nearby, which goes back years ago. We have this rose at that location. We also have it now planted across the stage area here. And Veterans Honor, as you can see, is a beautiful red rose. As most hybrid teas, it takes a certain level of care, and if you're willing to devote that to it, you are paid off in spades with flowers throughout the season.
It's just amazing to me that you're able to keep this sacred space in such pristine order 365 days a year.
Well, thank you. We go directly to Congress. We're funded separately from other government entities. And I think, fortunately, both Office of Management and Budget and Congress realize that the way we pay tribute to those who served our nation is twofold. One is through the proper funerals and ceremonies that we carry out throughout the day at Arlington. And then in the more long term, we honor those who served our nation by keeping this place at its most beautiful possible. And with that, it takes resources. Everything from obviously lots of mowing of turf and grass and trimming around each stone, to washing all the stones throughout the year, to straightening them up, to planting the gardens and having spots for restorative healing kind of garden spaces throughout the cemetery. You have to look from a holistic point. Why are we here? What's this about? And a big portion is the beauty of the ceremonies and the beauty of the landscape. And that's always job one. We keep that in our minds. Everybody at Arlington at all times is to honor those who served our country. And what better way to do this than to acknowledge them through that we care about this place enough to make it look as nice as possible.
Well, it certainly is a sublime landscape.
Well, thank you.
While I was in New York, I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to visit my dear friend Elizabeth Lear, and she gave me a tour of a beautiful garden labyrinth that she designed for meditation.
Alan, now we're entering the labyrinth, which is...
I see it, yes.
We use Belgian block, which was left over from the old driveway. Of course, you could use many materials, and it's set in the lawn so that it kind of disappears. Do you want to try walking it?
Let's walk it. Yeah, so you step on the stone.
On the stones.
And this was a request of the client.
Yeah, the inspiration were from labyrinths that she saw in Scotland and Chartres, and she wanted to repeat it in her yard for meditation and just, kind of as a folly.
It's beautiful, and it's the Belgian block are deep enough that you just mow right over it.
That's we set the grades with the transit.
And you just continue to follow this and get into a meditative state. Now it takes us eventually.
How far do you want to go before I tip over?
Before you fall into a deep meditation. And then in the center we have the poetry pot by Bob Dash.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. What a nice focal point.
It's a nice centerpiece. I like urns in the lawn, statuary in the lawn.
Yes,
Yeah,
just
it's-
one element there in that space. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for this tour. It's
Oh, you're
been
so
so
welcome.
inspiring.
Thank you for coming to visit.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
This is a late 19th century bell jar that I used to cover over an agave plant. It's just another way of growing a houseplant. And I use it as a centerpiece here in the library at the garden home. This room is one of my favorite places to be because it's full of books, and I love books. And as you might guess, many of these books are about gardens, gardening, and some of them are even about botanic gardens. I'm crazy about visiting botanic gardens, and if you get a chance, go to every one you can because there's so many beautiful and interesting things you can see there. Brian Voigt with the Denver Botanic Gardens tells us what you can expect when you walk through their entry gates.
You know, Denver Botanic Gardens was started in 1951. The gardens actually has 3 locations, and this site is 23 very intensely planted acres right in the center of Denver. Denver Botanic Gardens is very unique around the world because in this very compact area we have over 50 separate gardens. So when you walk down a path, you can at one moment look at this beautiful Japanese style landscape and then go down a path and you're in the middle of the Colorado montane, and go a little bit farther, you're looking at an alpine area. We have all kinds of different environments that we showcase here. You know, a lot of our gardens are magnets for people. They have a special connection to them, and that's really part of our mission, is to make sure the diversity of our gardens appeals to a broad range of folks. A lot of people are attracted to our Japanese garden. The style of it is very contemplative. It's a great place to just stand and surrender yourself to nature. But what makes it extraordinary is that the plants in there are native species. So the pines in there are from harvested trees from the Colorado Rockies. Some of them are 400 and 500 years old. The core mission of the gardens is to connect people with plants, but underneath that we have 4 core values. The first is sustainability, talking about the role that plants play in the entire ecosystem of the world, how they sustain life and why they're important to the long term. Next is relevance. What is meaningful to you? A child comes in here, they see things close up and down low. I might come in here and look at how they built some hardscape. Others might come in and want to get an aesthetic appreciation of color. It has to be relevant to each individual. The next is transformation. What is it that you've taken from this place and used to transform something in your life? You've taken an idea for a garden. You've learned more about how the world works, something that's transformative. And the final is diversity. Diversity of plant species, of ecosystems, but also demonstrating why diversity in plant life makes plants stronger, and it also makes human beings stronger. From the moment someone drives into our parking structure to the moment they sit down for lunch, they're wandering in a garden, they leave at the end of the day, we want that experience to hit all of those core values, especially feeling transformed somehow inside and making it just a powerful moment in their lives. One of the things that makes the gardens unique is just the number of horticulturalists we have on staff. As we have visitors coming through, they may see something in the dryland mesa, and they've been trying to grow something in their own backyards and they have a question about how to do it. There's always somebody in the grounds who can answer those technical questions for the visitor, whether they're a gardener thinking about their own backyards, or whether they're a plant fancier who just wants to learn more about it. We see our role as a teaching institution as a very powerful one that we can play.
I don't know about you, but I love to surround myself with beauty. And spring flowering bulbs are about as satisfying and easy to grow as you can get. One of my favorite ways to grow spring bulbs is in containers. I can plant a mini garden that can be placed just about anywhere that I need a splash of color, whether it's inside or out. Okay, let's take daffodils for instance. One of the first things you should know is that they need to be planted in the fall for those spring flowers. One great thing about planting bulbs in containers is you can get the soil just right. I use a mix of 2 parts soil and 1 part sand. You see, good drainage is so important to bulbs because you don't want them to freeze during the winter. In this case, I've taken 3 plastic nursery containers and filled them with about 2 to 3 inches of soil. Then I added 5 miniature daffodil bulbs to each container and then tagged them for identification. Next, I covered the bulbs with a little more soil, and for good drainage, I covered the top with sand. And lastly, I topped it off with a little water to get them off to a good start. They need to be watered about once a month if Mother Nature doesn't provide any moisture in the way of rain or melted snow. They need about 15 weeks of temperatures below 45 degrees. And then whenever you're ready to bring them indoors, just slip the plastic nursery containers into decorative pots to match your decor. This is a fun and easy way to bring the garden inside. It's time to take a look at some landscapes. I enjoy it when you send photographs of your gardens or your landscapes to me and we make some suggestions for improvements. Now today I have a house in Louisiana. It has a low flat area. It belongs to Cindy. Now she tells me that the house faces west and that she really likes a very simple green landscape and that from time to time in the early spring she can get, because it's low, some water will come in with heavy rains. So we need to be cognizant of that, and that these landscape timbers across the front have decayed and are ready to be moved out. So I think this is an opportunity to make some changes. One of the first things I would do is remove these. These are too large for the scale of the house. So I think we ought to take those out. And then these shrubs over here are overgrown all around the house corner and under the window. So those probably should be removed as well. So with the idea of these being gone, I think we have a nice long horizontal line here to work with. Now what I would do is make a bed that comes along here and then comes around this tree like that. And then maybe on this end, plant some flowering trees that might make a grouping over here on this side. It could be in the form of crepe myrtle, or if there's a neighbor that needs to be screened, the little gem magnolias would be beautiful over here and would flourish in your part of the world. Now, as far as the landscape planting under the house, if you want something very simple, you could go with just a basic evergreen. And what I would do is do something of contrast here and keep it about this size. You see, you don't want it to, you only want it to be about halfway the height of that window there. And then come along here and remove this. This looks like a large yucca, so that should be taken out as well. So we need to get rid of the yucca there. And then what I would do is fill in between here and here and here with shrubs and leave the windows free. And this would be an opportunity to plant some aspidistra, cast iron plant, which would be a very low plant, or even the ground cover that we might use here. And I would recommend this be something like Asian jasmine, a very low growing ground cover. And then underneath these trees, you might carry the same shrub and do a mass of those on this side. And then I would repeat the same thing over here, just like this, and bring those across here. Now, you could accent this side with some Oakleaf Hydrangeas, native plants. I think native plants would fit the sort of ambience of this place very well. Now, one last thing to think about is you've got all of this small growth coming off of the tree here, and I would remove all of this, these small limbs up to a certain point, because it sort of distracts from the house itself. All right, now one last thing you might think about. What about wrapping a bed just around the mailbox and then accenting it the same way over here to create a sense of entry? And what I would do is take this shrub, whatever we use here, which could be a small leafed holly, place it here and one here, and then do the ground cover. Whatever ground cover we use over here, we would use there as well. So you're using a lot of the same elements. The house is a very simple design, and you want to make sure the landscape reflects that. Good luck. I'm here with Matt McClure, and Matt is showing me one of his favorite summer recipes. It's so simple. It's taking one of the great delicacies of the summer garden, the yellow crookneck squash, and making a delicious chilled squash soup. So how many squash do you actually use for this recipe?
4 or 5. They're fairly small.
Right.
And you don't use the whole squash. You cut the seeds out. The seeds are mostly water.
Right.
And I want the soup to be yellow.
The
And
flavor's really on the outer edges,
And
isn't it?
that's
Good bit
true.
of flavor in the skin.
Mm-hmm.
Remind me, how much in the way of onion did we put in here?
This was 1 whole onion.
Yeah. Ready? So we just want to soften these, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit of salt.
Okay. Now what are you working on there? I see you got the basil out.
This is the garnish. You're not going to put a whole lot in the soup.
Yeah.
But you want it, it's going to be basil, a little lemon zest, and a little bit of garlic.
Now this is the surprise ingredient to me for this. It's cinnamon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is an old trick I used to have. I would throw something in the soup that I intended to pull out, but would forget, and then that would get caught up in the blender. And so this is my little reminder.
All right. Well, this is good and soft. Are you ready for the water, you think?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
it's looking good.
All right. There we go. You added the cinnamon. I'm just gonna slightly cover the squash. How's
That's
that?
it.
Does that look about right?
Looks good.
Okay.
Next, I've got garlic and the basil in here. This is about 4 or 5, probably medium large
Leaves.
size leaves.
Okay.
And you want them chopped up pretty fine, but not pulverized.
Right. So we have garlic, we have basil, and now we're going to add some lemon. Okay. And about how much lemon zest are you thinking, Matt?
Probably zest of 1 lemon.
Zest of 1 lemon. Okay.
And I do add a little extra virgin olive oil to the basil and the lemon and stuff, so it's almost like a sauce in a way.
Okay. And about how much of that are you thinking?
Probably about 2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons. Okay. Now is this is enough for the entire recipe?
Yeah.
And how much will this make?
About a quart, so that's probably in the neighborhood of about 3 or 4 bowls of soup.
3 or 4 bowls of soup. This is really a recipe that doesn't take much time. You want to take it there?
Sure can.
So the idea now is to what, puree this?
It's a pureed soup.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now all we have to do is chill it.
That's right. Chill it just for about half an hour or about an hour in the fridge.
Yeah, and then you just garnish it by just a drizzle of this concoction.
That's
It's
right.
Full of flavor.
Full of flavor, that's right.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And I hope you've found some ideas that you can carry through when you're creating a beautiful, tranquil outdoor living space for yourself. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at plansmith.com.